Hello, everyone. This is Adam Fishman, Executive Director of American Friends of Likud, and I want to welcome you once again to our continuing AFL exclusive insider briefing series of webinars. And today we are very fortunate to have with us a very good friend of mine, actually, Eli Hazan. Eli, I've known and has been a part of, let's just say, in and around the Likud, certainly as long as I have, which is the last 10 or so years, and probably, and I'm certain of it, much longer before that. Just as a brief introduction to Eli, he is the Foreign Affairs Director for the Likud Party. He's one of Israel's foremost experts in political strategic communications. He's lectured on behalf of the Likud, both within Israel and abroad. He's worked directly with the Likud campaigns. Let's see. Oh, Eli, you also served as an advisor to the Minister of Education, as well as a parliamentary advisor to the chairman of the Likud faction and the coalition. You've lectured at the Israel Center for Political Training. You've done PR for Israel Hayom. You were, in fact, the editor-in-chief of the Likudnik, which I believe is the Likud's online publication. And you have a BA and an MA in history from Hebrew University, and you live with your wife and your family in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem. So before we start anything else, I want to welcome you. Welcome, Eli.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure being here.
And I want to say that that is a phenomenal banner you have behind you. That is your home. That is your apartment in Jerusalem. And the fact that you have that enormous banner is a testament to where you stand in terms of your political ideology. But I want to ask you, as many have asked me, what is the role of the Foreign Affairs Director for the Likud Party? Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah. In fact, it's very important. This is behind the scene, as we call it. I was appointed by Prime Minister Netanyahu in 2014 as Foreign Affairs Director, and I mainly deal with the international scene through the political arena. Not many people know, but there are many organizations abroad that are dealing with international affairs, and I use those organizations in order to do three things. One, to brand Netanyahu and Likud, to protect the state of Israel, and to promote the free market policy. Those are the three things. Since 2014, I've been to more than 40 countries all around the world in order to promote those issues. I hosted in Israel more than 1,000 politicians, academia people, journalists, and so on and so forth. I've been hosted a lot to CNN, to Sky News, to many international channels. And I'm a speaker, a spokesperson on behalf of Likud in these kind of issues. I'm very active in social media. And that's it, more or less. And I tell you the truth, I did many things in my life, and I feel privileged to do it for Likud right now. That's it. I was trying to conclude it, in a few sentences, but it's more than that. If I may, I did two things that it's extremely important that I want to share. If you allow me to show two things that I want to show. One, I cannot do it, you cannot share the screen, but one, I brought Likud to be a regional member in the European Parliament, thanks to the help of the Conservative Party of Britain, their sister party of ours, and I brought Likud to be a member of IDU, International Democrat Union, which is the umbrella organization of all center-right parties around the world, headed by Stephen Harper, the previous Prime Minister of Canada. And in that case, I'm able to promote a lot of policies that we believe in. That's what I do. And I was trying to be very short about it.
No, I appreciate that. So I actually want to it's a very exciting time, obviously, here. It's always an exciting and interesting time here in Israel. But today specifically, we finished with the elections just last week, and the parties, all of the Knesset factions that made it into the Knesset approached and met with President Ruvi Rivlin in order to give their recommendations for who would be the prime minister. And the magic number here is 61 mandates, 61 seats, which would represent a majority in the Knesset. Whoever can get to that number will lead the governing coalition. As it stands right now, we know that there have been 52 that have recommended Bibi Netanyahu, and there have been 45 that have recommended Yair Lapid. we know that Naftali Bennett has recommended himself, and his 7 seats go toward that. And the other Arab parties and others, including Gideon Sa'ar, have not recommended anyone. And that leaves us with today, Ruby Rivlin, the president, handing over the first opportunity to form a coalition to Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister. And the question really becomes, what is he going to do now? We've seen the arguments that there is no clear path. Even if he makes a deal with Naftali Bennett, those 7 seats will only get him to 59. How does he get over the hump? How do you get to 61? What is and this is how we've built this talk, what is the process and the prospects for getting to that magic number for the prime minister when there are a lot of obstacles in the way?
Okay, first of all, I believe that this is achievable. I mean, it is not a dream. It's very important to make it clear. I mean, usually when I read the Haaretz newspaper, and by the way, I'm a subscriber to Haaretz because I want to read what my rivals are thinking. They give the picture that it's impossible, but I truly believe in Netanyahu. We can do it in both ways. First of all, to rely on Ram. We don't want to do it. I don't believe we are going to do it. And the second option is to find defectors, MKs who were elected in Sa'ar's faction or in Gantz's faction, and to find some MKs who would join us. I want to remind to many people that it's already happened in the past. And people tend to forget the alternative. The alternative is much worse. And it seems to me that Netanyahu will put a lot of effort in order to get 2 MKs from other political parties. And I truly believe that he can make it. For instance, usually we don't speak about it out loud outside, but take, for instance, Minister Pnina Tamanu-Shata. She's part of Blue and White of Benny Gantz, and she wants to stay in the Knesset. We know that. It's very important for her. She's a Jewish Ethiopian, immigrated from Ethiopia. The representation of the Ethiopian community in Israel is very important for her. And she knows that she may lose the privilege to be represented in the Knesset. So I guess that Netanyahu will put a lot of focus in order to get 2 defectors from the other side. And I truly believe that as soon as he will get the 61, he will just break the walls, as we call it. I truly believe that other parties will come. A good friend of mine told me that I'm very naive, but we know that Netanyahu can do the impossible. He's a magician in many ways, and maybe this is his last opportunity in his career, and he knows that. So I guess we will go through this path. He has, according to the process, he has 28 days from now. If he's not, if he will not be able to do it, he have an extension of 14 more days, altogether 42 days in order to form a coalition. If not, it seems that the story is lost. In that case, it goes to Lapid. According to the numbers, we truly believe that Lapid won't be able to form a coalition. There is too many contradictions, ideological contradictions inside the potential coalition of Yair Lapid. Naftali Bennett thinks that he can do it himself. By the way, according to the law, he's able to get it. I mean, if Lapid will get the keys after Netanyahu, he has only 28 days instead of the 42. And if he's not able, according to the law in Israel, if 61 MKs send a letter to the president that they want to crown one of the MKs, so this is achievable. So we have to wait and see right now where it goes to. I truly believe in Netanyahu, and please do remember, this is his last chance in order to form a coalition.
So when you're talking about defectors, we'll get back to the idea of RAM, which was the United Arab Party.
Yeah, United Arab List.
Before we get to that, though, I wanted to ask you about defectors. There is a restriction to a defector. You mentioned MK,
yeah.
Right? There is a restriction to that. I mean, if it's not someone who defects, I mean, because the law has tried to keep people from not defecting, right? You cannot be a member in the Knesset moving forward to the next Knesset. You can't be a minister. You can't be a deputy.
No. I want to make it clear, Adam. If you defect from one party to another with no approval of your previous party, you cannot run in parties that serving in the same Knesset in the next Knesset. It means that you can run in a completely new party. That is the limitation. For instance, Orly Levy Abuxis, she defected from Israel Beitenu in 2016, if I remember correctly, when he joined Netanyahu. And then she created a new old party. It used to belong to her father, Gesher, but it was, in fact, a new party. That is the only way that you can do it. Unless you have 1/3, if you decided to defect, if you will get 1/3 of your party, then you're able to run in, current party in the next Knesset. Those are the rules. And by the way, I want to make it clear, we did it because in the 1980s and 1990s, it was a lot of, the people in Israel did not like it. A lot of MKs wanted to move from one party to another. So the Knesset decided to limit them.
So this limitation, and once you mentioned the 1/3 of the party, and in the case of New Hope, in the case of Gideon Sa'ar, that would be 2 of his MKs, and in the case of Benny Gantz's, that would be 3 MKs that would have to defect together in order to avoid the restrictions. So that seems, I mean, that's a very difficult thing to do. One of the suggestions, as you mentioned at the very top of it, that you didn't want to see Ra'am, which is the Arab party that split off from the joint list, being a support from the inside or the outside. Can you discuss what that is and why everyone has been talking about them as potential moderates that could be the kingmakers to take us over the top?
Okay, first of all, Ra'am has 4 seats on the current Knesset. In fact, they are the kingmakers. Take, for instance, Netanyahu, he has only 59, he needs 61. If Ra'am joins him, so he has 63, the magic number, and that's it. Let's speak a little bit about Ra'am. Ra'am is an extremist party. By the way, they support in the Muslim Brothers in Egypt, for instance, they support Hamas. But, and there is a big but in here, their leader, Mansour Abbas, decided to change the attitude, not only of Ra'am, but the whole concept of the Arab MKs, because until now, the Arab Joint List, by the way, Ra'am was part of the Arab Joint List, they denounce any experience or they denounce any connection with the state of Israel. I mean, they were elected as members of Knesset, but they did not want to take any part in the government because they don't want to recognize Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. Mansour Abbas, and it started many months ago, many years ago, I would say, he was elected the first time in 2019, and he decided to change the attitude. He said, for the meantime, I put the national things aside. It doesn't mean that I became a supporter of the state of Israel, but with all due respect, we are 20% of the population, while the Arab leaders used to neglect the Arab issues in the state. Well, the situation of the Arab community in Israel is getting worse and worse and worse. So I want to be wise. Instead of neglecting this thing, I want to be part of the decision-making. I want to get more benefits, more budget to the Arab society. I want to change the Arab society in general. He made a speech a few days ago, and he spoke about changing the attitude. I tell you what is my problem with him. Yesterday, a terrorist, an Arab-Israeli terrorist, who murdered Israeli soldier many years ago, he was released from prison. And then some representatives of Ra'am went to hug him. And this is something which is unacceptable in my point of view. And there is another big but. You have to remember that we are concerned, or we are afraid, that if Likud will not collect Ra'am, then the other side will do it. Because Ra'am, they are players in the game, they are the kingmakers. And then it raises a very important question. If you want to be realistic, you say, wait a second, they are part of the game. I cannot ignore that. On the other hand, ideologically, I have nothing to share with them. So that is the tension right now inside Likud party. The majority of the party is against any collaboration with Ra'am, although you can find, I would say, not few voices, but many voices who say, like Tzachi Hanegbi, Minister Tzachi Hanegbi, who say, it is an option. I have no other choice because you have to look at the alternative. That is the story of Ram. I hope we will not be there, although I must tell you that as a Likudnik, I like the attitude of Mansour Abbas. Why? Because the Arabs, they are 20% of the population in Israel. Instead of fighting, all day long, many years, I'm very active on the social media. I used to say that if we will find, as Likudniks, different voices from the Arab society, we will hug them. And I hope that we will find more people like Mansour Abbas, but with one important thing, that they denounce terror or any support of terrorism.
Is there any way in that scenario that Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir of the religious Zionist parties would agree to stay as part of a coalition that included Ram?
I don't see it as such, but I want to expand about one thing that I want to speak about it. That what we call a minority government. It hardly happens in the history of the state of Israel. If I remember correctly, only Ehud Barak, before he stepped down in 2001, he had a minority government for a temporary time. But there is what we say, and by the way, if you look at the political world in the Western world, it is not unique anymore. Take, for instance, in Sweden, they have a minority government. In Belgium, they have a minority government. So this is a new fragment, I would say, or a new way of ruling. There is another possibility. Right now, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir against it totally, while Netanyahu say, Ram will not be part of the government. I will cooperate with them only civically, but they will support us from the outside. Right now, there is a complete resistance from Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, but not only, even MKs from Likud say, we're against it completely, but, and again, there is a lot of but in this, webinar. You have to remember that they don't want the fifth election. So sometimes, reality can take you to a different direction that you don't want, but you don't have any other choice but to do it. We will have to wait and see at least a month and a half from now.
So I wanted to take it to the next step, and that is, or actually, I want to just dispel with this specific issue, and that is the trial which just began against Prime Minister Netanyahu, or the evidentiary portion of it just began. Does it make a difference anymore, as far as the citizens of Israel, as far as making a coalition in terms of the Knesset members? Does it make a difference?
In the total, it is amazing to say so. No. I mean, take for instance the last election results. Those who are for Bibi, they truly believe, people like me, I truly believe that he's innocent, he's under political persecution. In the past, Labor members, or at least David Ben-Gurion, used to call Zev Jabotinsky Vladimir Hitler. Other members of Labor or the left used to portray Begin as a terrorist or a fascist, used to portray Shamir as a terrorist. And then I say, Netanyahu is the next target. Because they cannot portray him anymore as a fascist, he brought 4 peace treaties. As you know, he prevented himself from, any kind of war whatsoever, ever since he was elected in 1996. So they could find a very problematic way to portray Netanyahu as a corrupt. I don't believe that he's corrupt. In fact, I truly believe that he's not corrupt. He's under political persecution. Many Likudniks like me, maybe other Likudniks that stay in the party believe so. Do you know Chaim Ramon, the former member of Knesset from Labor? By the way, he says the same, that Netanyahu is not guilty. The political system in Israel, quite distorted. In any case, if I have to conclude, we truly believe that it doesn't mean anything. If you are a supporter of Netanyahu, you will support him in any case. And if you object Netanyahu, you will object him in any case. The trial has it doesn't mean anything. And another thing, take for instance, the potential partners of Netanyahu. Yair Lapid, for instance, he mentioned today that Netanyahu is under trial, but we knew that already, that he is against Netanyahu and he will use it. Gantz, if you remember, he joined to the coalition of Netanyahu, although he knew that Netanyahu is under trial. So in fact, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything to anyone. And by the way, I can tell you that as an Israeli citizen, I'm quite concerned to the way, the political system goes or the judicial system goes. I'm concerned about the role of the Supreme Court in Israel. I truly believe that we need to take a step back as a politicians, not because I'm in favor of the Supreme Court. I truly believe the Supreme Court took too many power from the politicians, and we need to go back to 1988 when the system was quite clear. The politicians are politicians, the judges are judges, and you know the government is governing. Right now, we are not in this position, and I can tell you that I'm strongly support people like Yariv Levin, who say that the Speaker of Knesset, who say that we need to take back power from the Supreme Court, power from the deep state. Yes, and I truly believe, I'm not Donald Trump, I'm not living in the States, but I truly believe that there is a deep state in the state of Israel. I used to work as an advisor to the Minister of Education, and I have experienced that.
So I want to take a step back because, first of all, Yariv Levin is a very close friend of ours here at American Friends of Likud, and actually a neighbor of mine here in Modi'in.
Yeah, in Modi'in, of course.
I want to take another step back just with respect to the parties that are on the right in general. There's been a lot of talk that if Bibi would just step aside and allow the right to coalesce, you would have an even stronger Likud. You would have Bennett who would come back and Sarah would come back and so on and so forth. If you could respond to that, first of all, if there is going to be is that even a discussion within the Likud? There are those who said it is a discussion. Why don't we start there? Is that even a discussion that he would step aside in order to step back and allow a broad-based right coalition to lead Israel into the future?
No, I tell you why not. First of all, there is no discussion about it because Likud is the most democratic party in Israel. We had primaries. Everyone who wants to run against Netanyahu, he can do it once in a term. By the way, if we will go into the fifth election, Adam, let's say you are a member of Likud, you want to run against Netanyahu, you have this right and you can do it. Everyone can do it. By the way, Gideon Saar did it in 2019, 2020, and he lost. Likud is a democracy. By the way, the biggest democracy, in fact, with Labour Party, those are the only two democratic parties in Israel. We voted for the prime minister. We voted for Netanyahu. He has a big majority. This is one thing, practically, leave it aside. Let's say, not only theoretically, but in principle, people like me, I don't want to give up Netanyahu because Netanyahu is a symbol. You have to understand that the left wing, the media, the mainstream media, not all the media. For instance, I'm a commentator in Channel 20. Of course, this is not part of the mainstream media. But the left wing, the deep state, the mainstream media, they want to take Netanyahu down. And let me tell you one thing, and I was telling that to Nir Barkat, to Israel Katz. You have to understand that the next leader of Likud will be under the same treatment because I gave the examples. They used to call Zev Jabotinsky Vladimir Hitler. They used to demonize Menachem Begin. By the way, in the election of 1981, we could find on the web, commercials about Menachem Begin, be aware of the fascists, as a prime minister in 1981, after he brought the peace with Egypt. So nothing is going to change. For me, Netanyahu is a symbol. And by the way, from time to time, I have meetings with him and I beg him, don't leave. We don't want you to leave because you are a symbol. And I'm quite concerned, and I hope he will not make it, that one day he will get up and say, wait a second, I brought the vaccines, I brought peace treaties, you don't want me? I will leave. I don't want it. And more than that, if you are a Democrat, don't forget, potentially Netanyahu has 63 seats of support. I mean, Ram did not disqualify Netanyahu, and Bennett did not disqualify Netanyahu. 57 other seats, Gideon Saar, Lapid, Gantz, they disqualify Netanyahu. But altogether, he has the potential of more than 61 seats. More than that, why we are facing a fifth election? The left wing, the alternative to Netanyahu, they get the chance to form a government, but they did not do it. So I don't want him to leave. And by the way, I'm quite concerned that he will leave. And I must tell you that personally, I don't think I will stay in that case, in the political system. Netanyahu is a symbol, he's the symbol of the right. And I'm so, I used to work for Gideon Saar as Minister of Education and Parliamentary Assistant. I'm so disappointed with him. I cannot even describe it because he could stay, he could be the leader in the future. And by the way, he knows that he could get the same treatment of the left wing in Israel.
So I want to get to some of the questions that have been coming in while we've been having our discussion. The first is coming from our president in New York, Jerry Platt. And it is with respect to taking Ram in either on the inside or the outside. Having an Arab party, he says, if it's well controlled as part of the coalition, could be a good thing. You would get support from the Gulf. Anyone alleging apartheid against Israel wouldn't be able to do that, even though they already can't do that because of if you just look at Israeli society, but it would be in the government specifically. Third, these are not Palestinians we're talking about. These are Israeli citizens, which would make sense. And finally, the Arabs, if introduced, can be very polite and careful. And if that's the case, perhaps that would work even for the religious Zionists.
Okay, all those claims are very good. By the way, I used to claim it until yesterday. All the things that he said, by the way, I truly believe that if it will be, new voices from the Arab representatives in the Knesset, I will be in favor because we are Likud, we are not against Arabs. We are against those who support terrorism. By the way, when Mansour Abbas made his speech a few days ago, I posted on Facebook that I like these, new voices. I support him to be part of the coalition of Netanyahu. And, a lot of comments were against me until yesterday, until they released the terrorists, the fanatic terrorist who murdered this soldier. And then I could see the people of Abbas hugging. I cannot be tolerated this kind of behavior. And in fact, that is my, I would say, contradicting mind about it. On one hand, I cannot ignore them, that 20%. On the other hand, I cannot be tolerate to any kind of support of terrorism. And that is the contradiction. And unfortunately, I cannot solve it right now. But I truly agree with him. More than that, I can tell him that in addition to what he has said, that I strongly support because, think about it, Abbas belongs to the Muslim Brotherhood. And once they join to the government or join to the coalition, it creates a kind of, a clash inside the movement. On one hand, to be more realistic, on one hand, to be more, I would say, fundamental. But again, they need to denounce any kind of terrorism, and it would be much easier to people like me who support very much in the integration of the Arab population in the state of Israel.
So we mentioned before our good friend, Foreign Minister Yariv Levin, currently the Speaker of the Knesset. Would he continue, this is a question from our previous past president, Julio Messer, would he continue as the Speaker of the Knesset, or is there someone else who would step up? And following up to that, can the Speaker of the Knesset prevent the vote of a law excluding anyone under indictment from running for the premiership in a possible fifth election?
First of all, we simply don't know who is going to be the future Speaker of the Knesset because it depends on the vote. Right now, it was very important to Netanyahu to be the first one to get the keys from the president because we have what we call, איך אתה אומר, ועדה מסדרת, Adam?
I didn't hear him say
it
again.
Sorry?
I didn't hear what you said. ועדה מסדרת?
ועדה מסדרת. The commission, the committee of the Knesset who is elected. Sorry?
There's the protocol committee.
Yeah, exactly, the protocol committee. So it was very important for Netanyahu to get the keys first from the president, because the one who is the candidate for the prime minister, he gets the chairmanship of the protocol committee. It is very important because the protocol committee, if you have a majority, and right now we have a majority because Netanyahu gets the keys, they can promote many things. One of it is the vote for the Speaker of the Knesset, but they need a majority, or they can prevent it. If they don't have the majority yet, they can prevent it. So if I have to conclude, I don't have a clear answer for that because it depends on the coalition, on the future coalition. Regarding the question of Julio, can the Speaker of the Knesset can prevent the vote of law? The answer is yes. The Speaker of the Knesset has a big power inside of the Knesset, but it is not an absolute power. I mean, please do remember that we are not a dictatorship. The Speaker of the Knesset, although he has a very big power, he needs to find, some arrangements with the other parties. So it depends on the dynamic of the same time. Right now, we will do everything human possible in order to prevent this kind of law because it is unfair. You know, in the past, they used to speak, the political rivals of Likud used to speak about the French law, how Netanyahu will promote a law that will prevent, you know, from him to be indicted. And then we say, with all due respect, you were against it. We are against private law, as we say as well. So Yariv Levin, the Speaker of the Knesset, will prevent it as much as he can, but we need to wait and see what the future brings to us.
So speaking of the future, this is something that we started to speak about, and that is, would Prime Minister Netanyahu ever voluntarily step aside in order to move forward? But let's not speak about that. But
We will not do it.
Right, the pragmatic move, and that would be that there is going to come a time when Bibi's career in politics is going to end. And the question there is something that's always been asked amongst our friends, and that is when he finally steps down. This is also a question coming from our board member in California, Steve Goldberg. When the prime minister finally does step down, who do you believe are the leading candidates to replace him as the chairman of the party, the head of the party?
Okay, first of all, I want to emphasize, I work for the party, and what I'm going to reply does not reflect my view about it. I'm just giving you the picture as I see it, as an activist, as one who is involved in, you know, many of the moves. In fact, there is already, or there are some candidates already who declare that they are going to be candidates after Netanyahu. It is Israel Katz. By the way, you have to remember, according to the polls, Katz is not strong enough. I mean, he gets, you know, low number of percentage, but those who are making the polls, they tend to forget that Katz is very strong inside the party. Many mayors of Likud supporting him very much. And therefore, I guess that he is one of the favorites to be the leader of Likud. You have Nir Barkat, of course. He's leading almost in every poll that I see for the future leadership. You have Yuli Edelstein. Edelstein is a symbol as well. Think about it. He was prisoner of Zion in the Soviet Union, and for the Likudniks is very important. Miri Regev already declared about it, and Avi Dichter. Those are the 5 names that I know about. But, and I want to say again, but, besides that, there are many discussions about the chief of Mossad, Yossi Cohen. Those are the 6 names that I know about them. And again, I want to emphasize after what I have said that Likud is a democracy. And we have approximately 150,000 members, which will elect the future candidate or the future leader of Likud. I hope it will be many years from now.
So, but understanding that, you're talking about 150,000, what is important to them? Because now we have been meeting with the members of Knesset and the ministers for years, and we've developed wonderful relationships with them, and being Americans and recognizing or rather recognizing first and foremost, just how much of a statesman Bibi Netanyahu has been. When we look at the candidates, and some of which who you have mentioned, and we look at the people down the line, there are those who are very diplomatically oriented, let's say, such as Yuli Edelstein and Nir Barkat, who speak very well in English as well, you know, and seem to be able to connect. And then there are others who don't seem quite as diplomatically inclined, but then again, like you said, Israel Katz, Miri Regev, they have support within the Likud. What is it that the Likud voters, the 150,000 Likud members, are looking for in their leader?
Oh, it is a very tough question. I can only imagine, because we are not speaking about it inside. First of all, they want a good candidate, someone who is with a vision. For instance, take for Israel Katz again. Why Katz is very popular? Because Adam, I don't know when you made Aliyah, but don't forget
2005.
2005. So you had the chance to see how Israel Katz, as Minister of Transportation, with his vision to change the transportation in the state of Israel. And he did, you know, a great job. For instance, during Passover, I went, you know, to a vacation in the north. I did it in 1.5 hours. It is amazing. In the past, it used to take 3 hours. So Katz is a man of a vision, but he doesn't know how to speak English, at least not a fluent English. And I truly believe that in the end, the Likud supporters or the Likud members, they are looking for a pivot, as we call it. Someone is a good candidate, he can win an election, and to promote our policy. I don't want to say an ideology because I can open up another gate to the complexity of the ideology inside Likud. But someone who can win the election, who can get a victory, and then to lead the party in a proper way.
So based on that, I want to ask one final question before I let you go tonight, and that is with respect to the United States. If you've looked at what Bibi Netanyahu has been able to do, first in weathering the storm of the Obama administration, and then what he was able to accomplish with respect to the Abraham Accords, moving the embassy, the Golan Heights, as well as other wonderful achievements with the Trump presidency, and now with perhaps a more hostile administration returning in the Biden administration, does that play into the Likud members' thought process when it comes to a leader of Israel, not just the Likud, but ultimately the leader of Israel?
No doubt about it, but I tell you what, right now we are focusing on, that Netanyahu will stay as party leader, because we will never forget that Netanyahu was the one who was able to deal with Barack Obama. By the way, I don't think that Obama was the enemy of the state of Israel. He was pro-Palestinian, no doubt about it, but he was not the enemy. And we needed a statesman like Netanyahu who would be able to deal with someone like Obama, and we need him urgently right now to deal with Biden. Netanyahu, in that case, is a key player, because, for instance, look about the alternatives. No one can deal with Biden. No one can deal with the attitude, the new old attitude of Biden's administration. Netanyahu is the only one who can make it, but I want to add one more thing. You know, before Menachem Begin stepped down, it was a question inside Likud, who is going to be able to replace him. By the way, it reminds me of the same situation. Netanyahu is sometimes more stronger than Menachem Begin used to be in the Likud, but with one difference. Likud is a democracy right now, and during Menachem Begin, it was not a democracy. It was a party of one man. By the way, he was elected by the Central Committee members, but the party itself was not democratic. In that case, we are looking for someone who will be similar to Netanyahu. In the case of vision, in the case that you can see, 10 steps forward, and things like that. Right now, we have a big question mark about it, because they are not experienced in that. Take, for instance, Katz, Nir Barkat, Yuli Edelstein, who I believe are the three, favorite candidates to be the leaders. They don't have the experience. More than that, Netanyahu created, we say in Likud in the general election, and you know that, Adam, you could see it, Netanyahu is a different league of his own. And in that case, he created a league of his own. For instance, I can tell you that when I go in the international scene, no one can compete with his English. It's impossible.
Right, even some Americans, I would believe, can't.
Exactly. And I was told by one English statesman, by the way, an MEP from the European Union, and he told me that he knew Netanyahu in the 1980s, when Netanyahu was a diplomat in the United Nations. And he said that I could learn from Netanyahu English, and he is British. So yeah, he created a big distance or a big gap to the future
Eli, this is one of the main criticisms, or one of the many criticisms that we've heard of Bibi, is that because he has established himself so far ahead of the field, there's been no one that he's groomed, there's been no one that he's helped come along. If you're talking about the next person in line, does he have a responsibility, is the question. Does he have a responsibility for the state of Israel moving forward to groom the next leader after him, so that you can move forward with that same vision, and leave with the legacy and continue toward the future?
I see it as unfair question. I tell you why. Adam, in the political scene in the state of Israel, the competition among politicians is too high. Let's speak frankly, and I'm an Israeli, I'm not a diplomat, I can speak frankly. They hate each other. They despise each other. It's not only on Likud. I could not see, I was taking part in many debates before the election, in the last fall's election, And this question raised again and again and again. And many students ask me this kind of question. And then I ask them, did Yair Lapid prepare anyone to succeed him? The answer is no. Did Tzipi Livni did it? No. The answer is no. No one did it. No one is doing it. So this is an unfair question. And besides that, don't forget, if you are a good leader, you will create yourself as a good leader. You don't need someone to prepare you, because there is a reality. If you remember, and it is not an history lesson, but Yitzhak Shamir, people don't tend to forget. Menachem Begin did not prepare Yitzhak Shamir to be the leader of Likud. Menachem Begin stood once in 1983, and he said, suddenly, I cannot do it anymore, ani achol od. And then Shamir was elected a few months later. And please do remember, we were in a economic crisis, political crisis. We were, in a mess in Lebanon. And Shamir, only in 2 years, he stabilized the economy. We went, to the security zone in Lebanon, and he made the state of Israel more stable. By the way, retrospectively, I must tell you that Shamir, in many ways, were much better than Menachem Begin.
So I just want to get to the last question here, because I see that our good friend and President Club
Mindy, I see.
New Jersey, Mindy Stein, and I want to make sure that if we can get all the questions, I want to get them in. She's asking, what is the breakdown of the Arab vote? Has there been a shift of Arab Zionist voters who now vote for Jewish parties rather than the Arab parties?
Oh, this is too complicated to answer, but I'll try to do it. The answer
well, we
is
do know that there was, in fact, in this election, especially in this election, that there was a concerted effort by Netanyahu to bring the Arab vote back into the Likud, or partially to the Likud.
What I'm going to reply to Mindy, it is not a complete answer, but she can understand what I'm saying. First of all, in general, no, not many Arabs shift their vote into the Zionist parties. For instance, Likud, I believe we get 25,000 votes of the Arabs in general, in total, only 25,000. But don't forget, Mindy, that many of the Arabs, they voted for Ram because Ram did not disqualify Netanyahu. Think about it. Ram was the smallest party in the Arab Joint List. They have become the biggest party in the Arab society. It is amazing. And Mansour Abbas said, I'm not disqualifying Netanyahu. This is a shift. More than that, the Arab Joint List in 2019, they had 15 seats. Today, altogether, the Arab parties has only 10 seats. So there is a shift, but not necessarily into a Zionist parties. That is the complete answer.
So with that, I want to thank you, Eli, for joining us this evening. I want to thank everyone for joining us on the line, and we are looking forward to a very active 28 days ahead of us as the coalition negotiations begin in earnest. And we hope that Prime Minister Netanyahu will once again prove the magician and be able to step away with a ruling coalition of 61, or even a minority government, but nevertheless still leading Israel and moving forward. So we want to thank you, and we look forward to visiting with you, not only when you travel in the US, but when we eventually do travel back here on our missions, and hopefully, as I mentioned at the top of this program, in October. So thank you very much, Eli, for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
See you next time.
Thank you. And I want to say one thing. If you have any question, you need any help, don't hesitate. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.